Well, what should office spaces look like in future? To talk about that, I'm joined by Valerie Jardon. She's managing partner of strategy at IA Interior Architects. Valerie, thank you so much for doing this.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Linda. It's great to be
It's
here.
it's such a good time to have this conversation because I've been doing this podcast since 2020, I guess mid 2020. So everyone was home, working from home. And I talked to a
Yeah.
couple of people then about what are offices going to look like? What should we be thinking about? And at the time, I think there was a feeling that there'd be a lot of work from home in future. And now we're kind of at a different spot. So I'm really interested to hear your thoughts. But let's start by talking about your position, what you do,
hmm
and how you ended up doing this.
Yeah. Well, I lead the strategy practice for IA Interior Architects, and my role really sits hand in hand with my team. We work together very closely, and we're a small, mighty group across the firm, and we exist to really help organizations transform data and the understanding of humans into actionable insights that drive space needs and support their culture, especially through all of the change and uncertainty that's been going on. And so my background is in interior design, and I've spent my entire career with one foot in design, one foot in strategy, really working whether it was with community master plans or with office space direction, trying to bring together just a different value add and spin. After formal training, I did go on and get certified in things like strategic foresight, and I got my MBA. And then I've always dabbled with passions of mine with neuroscience and designing for happiness and organizational behavior and all of these other wonderful topics. If I could be a lifelong learner, I think I would be.
Well, I love the idea of making people happy. Let's
Yeah.
let's start with just the basics. If
Okay.
an organization wants to design a space, what are the things you want to know from them to help them, get the right things in place?
Well, we do a very lengthy discover process when we start any kind of a strategy project with a client. So, the very first thing I'm always going to ask people is, how do you like to be communicated with? Because first and foremost, that makes everything go smoothly. But outside of that, I really need to get an understanding of their benchmarks. What type of space are they existing, that they live in right now? And what are they trying to work towards? What do they see their future goals being? What are some successes? How would they say, how would they describe that this project's been successful in the end? So we do a lot of visioning with executive leaders, interviews with various leadership across the organization. We do focus groups, workshops, a lot of different surveys, all different types of activities to just do a large collection of data in the beginning so that can help us frame everything as we move forward.
What is on the wish list these days when organizations say, we want a space and we want it to be functional and maybe beautiful and everything else? What would they like to see?
Oh, clients are asking for the life raft, I feel like at this point. There's a lot of uncertainty, and uncertainty is great in a lot of ways because it gets us thinking a little bit differently and keeps us curious, which is positive in a lot of ways, but it's also very unsettling. And so most clients don't want to be the first to try anything new. They're all asking for help with something, whether it's we need a purpose, a clear purpose for the office. Why are people here? How can we add flexibility without creating chaos from a, infrastructure perspective or an operational perspective? A lot of folks right now are saying, how can we right size our spaces and balance our meeting room ratios? Because that's something that's very off right now. Uh, that meeting rooms were there, but just not to the extent or size balance ratios that they needed. So that's a big thing most folks are asking for. There's certainly clients that are saying, how is AI going to impact the workplace? So a lot of those conversations have been taking place. But most people need help with getting technology even up to date to have good meetings before they can really launch into the AI world. And then, again, they all asking for like, what's the silver bullet of getting people to come in? So there's still a lot of conversation around amenities and how to improve culture. So we talk to them a lot about creating purpose and how can that really, be the driver that gets people back.
Just on the practical side, though, a few years ago, we were hearing, well, it's going to look more like an airport lounge. People will come and go, or a Starbucks, and we'll have comfortable chairs. How's the thinking now?
I think we've veered a little bit away from that. At the end of the day, you still need, if you're coming into the office, you're coming in for a reason, right? You're either coming in because you want to work alongside a person and have meetings, or you're coming in because you don't have a quiet space at home to work and you need to focus. Maybe you're just more productive in the office. And so the office still has to balance that social aspect or the collaborative aspect just as much as the focus aspect. And so we are seeing there was a huge shift to do a lot more just meeting collaborative space like you just described. And now it's starting to shift back to a little bit more of a 50-50 balance in terms of shared space to individual space. And that's very important because everybody needs to have a spot where they can do the work that they need to. The other thing too with the Starbucks analogy you just used, uh, most folks need to have two monitors these days to do their work. And if you are building meeting rooms or any type of meeting space that doesn't have a second monitor in it, it's basically a wasted space. So people aren't going to find that as convenient for them to work in, and it just goes to waste.
What about, you said, people need their space. What's the thinking on having your own space with your own pictures of your kids up versus the whole hoteling thing? And I'm going to reserve a space because I've heard a lot of people say this is stressful for me. I'm supposed to
Yeah.
come in. I don't even know if I have a space.
Very much so. That is a thing. And what we have seen, interestingly, a few different perspectives on that, but the in one sense, you don't have people coming in. Your space hasn't been updated in a long time. So you make assumptions that you can reduce your footprint. Maybe you get a little bit more aggressive because you're going to do a seat sharing so that you don't have to provide as much. That's based on utilization today. And then we find out you give them this brand new space. Everybody's really enlivened by it. They're excited by it. And now you don't have enough seats. So we have seen that happen. Um, Certainly not on Fridays. No, still no one's coming in on Fridays. But when it comes to desk booking, I thought this was interesting. There was Leesman research that had shown that organizations that had desk booking systems where you had to reserve a spot before you came in had lower utilization than spaces that just had open desking. And I personally think that a lot of that comes from we've we're complicating somebody's day by making them book the desk. And people don't want any additional complications on top of all of the other things they already have going on. So there's ways to do unassigned desking in a positive, productive way with neighborhood layouts and things like that. But I think we have to think twice about the desk reservations and understand the culture a little bit.
Well, we have to talk about the remote work and the return to work and how many days. How do you plan for that? Because I don't see a consensus, and I've spoken to so many people that
Yeah.
this is going to look like this in 1 year or 2 years or 5 years.
Mm-mm. No, I don't think there is. And I don't think there's such a thing as a silver bullet anyway, because everybody works a little bit differently and they need different things. Return to office has been a a touchy subject in a lot of ways. Mandates are not working. We know that. I'm actually looking to do some research this year around the why behind coffee badging, because something we hear so often is that you have folks that don't want to come in because their commute has gotten so long or just bare, and then people are coming in just to swipe their badge and be seen, and then they go home and work again. So clearly commuting is not the issue for those folks. So there's still, at the end of the day, I think there's a lot of broken social contracts. The psychological contract is still not mended. There were a lot of problems that existed prior to the pandemic that were exacerbated by the pandemic, and we haven't really successfully addressed any of those. And it's just these persistent signals of an overall system that's misfit. It just not isn't coming together well.
Yeah, and I worry about this because you mentioned the happy part of this and making people
Yeah.
see the purpose. I see this really working against it in many cases. I don't know if office design can help that or it's something else can altogether.
There's so much, there's enough that design can do. And like I said, I have seen design bring people back because they have been so intrigued and they feel that they've been invested in. And I think that's a big thing that design can do for people is help them feel that they matter. They They participate in surveys, they come to these workshops, they give their opinions, they are part of select decisions. And at the end of the day, they feel that they've been given something that is really unique and special for them and how they work. And if you could do that right, then space can actually be a big, powerful magnet. But it is not the end all be all. There's still, toxic management that can take, an impact, right? We know all of these other things, bad policies, micromanaging, all of these things that can ultimately impact how people feel about the space.
Amenities, you mentioned that earlier. What are the amenities that you think are of value?
Hmm. We are seeing a little bit of a shift in amenities, and this has come up now a handful of times with different clients. So you can spend a great deal of money on amenities, and that's great. But it doesn't mean they're going to appeal to everybody. It doesn't mean everyone's even going to use them. They might just walk right past them, especially if you have a management problem where folks feel that they have to be at their desk to be seen as working. So there's that issue with amenities, but we are seeing some shift where they're reducing the amount of social amenities that they're offering slightly, and then they're bringing in different types of amenities like a digital concierge service where you can have things taken care of for you. And then the smart ones are even extending that to the employees' families. So now you have the family on the hook, the wife or the husband that's taking advantage of that. And so now if you are looking to make a move, that's something you and your spouse or partner now has to consider as a loss to the family above and beyond just the financial change, right? So those are some of the more interesting amenities that I'm seeing pop up.
That's interesting. What about the old style ones, the pool table or the yoga room or the art room or whatever, bike room?
Yeah, yes. They still exist. The pool tables, I feel, have all gone away. Same with ping pong, and dare I say, pickleball. They're there as building amenities in some cases, but for the most part, we are not seeing those be built at any large scale. Um, in fact, I was talking to somebody yesterday who said an amenity for them is just energy, is feeling that people are excited and around another, having the buzz, and they were purposely looking at lower floors to occupy because it gave them the streetscape access adjacency that allowed them to feel that there was a little bit more buzz in their office, even when there was less people there.
I don't know if you design mostly in cities or out of it, but one of the things I remember a designer telling me, I guess 4 years ago, 5 years ago, is what we still offer people is the space because a lot of this was she was out of London, England, and she said a
Mhm.
lot of people are living in really tiny spaces. So leaving
Right.
those spaces to work is still a pull. Is that still
Absolutely.
true? Yeah.
I think so. Yeah. There's a convenience factor that people, if they're going to leave, if you're leaving the house, you want to leave the house for something that is worthwhile. And if you can, double it up with a few other things, that's even better. But some common amenities that I hear people ask for all the time, but then ultimately don't necessarily get the use out of are things like fitness centers or childcare centers, because there's so much tied to the way a person is doing things on their personal level. So if I have kids, is it convenient for me to take my kids all the way to the office and have them watched right there? What if I'm sick? Now, my spouse may not, or partner might work in the total opposite direction. So there's limitations to the benefit of that childcare. And then the fitness center, it's only ever going to be a certain demographic of folks that are going to use that. And so it goes largely unused by the greater population.
If you're enjoying this conversation and want to bring insights like these to your next event, visit lindanazareth.com to book Linda Nazareth as your keynote speaker. Linda is an economist and futurist, and she is a dynamic and experienced speaker who has presented to audiences across a broad range of industries on the megatrends shaping the economy and the future of work. That's lindanazareth.com, or send an email to speaking@lindanazareth.com.
Since we're talking about people working at home, I'd just like to hear your thoughts on home offices. I know it's not necessarily what you do, but people are still splitting their time. If they're thinking about what to set up outside the office, what do you recommend they get?
Well, the nice thing about working at home is that you can absolutely hyper customize it for you. So you don't have to be stuck with the average. But So there are some things that you'd want to think about within the workspace itself that you're setting up. So you want to make sure that there's a very clear signal that you are bounded by some type of space that is for work and that you can get up and leave that space and now you're at home. So that is very, very important when it comes to home space, especially if you're not fortunate to have a door behind you or a room that you can go into. You really have to find a way to make some boundaries around the space. The other thing is visual clutter. If you are, especially if you, again, you can't work in an enclosed space, if you're more out in the open, you want to make sure that you really minimize the clutter around you, because even if you don't feel the stress, it is actually adding stress to you. So you want to clean up as much as you can. Um, there's there's also some, things, just stuff that you want no matter where you're working is access to daylight and hopefully a window nearby. You can also use things like scent and sound to cue kind of I started my day or I've ended my day. So bringing in some subtle nature sounds or using certain scents to trigger, focus or relaxation or whatnot. So lemon and citrus is a good focus scent. But you don't want to smell it. It should be like so subtle you barely notice it. Otherwise, it's distracting. And then outside of that, color is another big thing. Having, more of a like a sage green for a home office. I do a lot of work with Dr. Sally Augustine. She likes to talk about green. Sage green is a good home office color. And if you're a creative, you really want to stay away from red. So keep red away from your workspace as well. Otherwise, just make sure you're investing in good, ergonomics. Don't feel bad about investing in a sit stand desk. Get your good Wi-Fi, all of the things. But find some stuff that you can put into place that also remove some of the additional stresses around, do I sound okay or do I look okay or whatnot when you're on these things too. So you just feel better about it.
Oh, interesting. I'm continuously working on clutter, working at home.
Same. I'm in my basement, so I get I get it.
Well, let's get back to the bigger clients, the industrial clients, and the ones who are looking for a lot of input from you. I know you
Yeah.
use the pestle approach, and for people who don't understand, who don't are not familiar with that, tell us about that.
Yep. So PESTEL is an acronym, political, economic, sociological, technological, legal, and environmental. And or it could be called steeple if you're that mind camp. But it's just an acronym. And essentially we use it as a way of collecting what we call signals so that we are making sure that we're looking at all of those facets of data. So we're not, maybe relying too heavily on tech without understanding the environmental impacts or not understanding what people are looking for in the sociological aspects. So we're using that as our way of just gut checking our indicators. And signals are just that. They're indicators of future shift. It could be anything from a niche product to a trending hashtag on social media. It could really be anything there. And so our team is regularly tracking all of those different types of signals. And then we keep track of them in what we call a forecast radar. And so if you think of a horizon or a rainbow radar, it has all of these different dots across the pestle. And then we have common labels across the bottom. We talk about either now, next, or beyond, or early, emerging, and edge, however you want to call them. But essentially, it's when is this signal going to hit us? Is it currently happening and it's everywhere around us? So an example of a now signal or trend ultimately is AI, right? It's a massive trend. It's growing in acceptance, and it has signals across all areas of that pestle acronym. A next category is, what's coming soon. It's starting to emerge, maybe gaining popularity. And so those are things like neuro wearables. It would be an example of that. So it's touching on, we're looking at sociological trends and how people feel about wearing them or embracing them, and technological signals about who's putting them out. Do you have to sit quietly and wear your EEG headband? Or now there's, companies like Emotive that are putting out earbuds that have EEG sensing things in it. And then there's the beyond or the edge fringe things that we're looking at, which is something more like biocomputing, where we know that AI might hit a ceiling with all of the data center buildings going up and the energy and sustainability concerns around it. So biocomputing is something that might be emerging far out into the future to help offset some of those environmental and technological concerns. And then ultimately, all of that stuff starts to come together, and we play with the various signals that we're collecting, and then we start to put them into scenarios, and we play with different ways that could turn into a future of work.
Interesting. So, okay, there's one future of work you're calculating now, and there'll be another one next year. Do you even want to talk to us about where we might be in 5 years?
Sure. Um, I think I think I'll start with the maybe a little further out than 5 years.
Okay.
And I don't think there's ever even a single scenario that we are considering. But maybe if I just keep playing on the three that I gave you, the AI, the neuro wearables, and the biocomputing. And really the biggest indicator there is if biocomputing can be done, then AI can really continue to expand at a much more rapid rate. Neurowearables can become potentially more accepted. So a future of work, and there are many futures of work, but a future of work, just looking at those three signals and some of the other things we're looking at, a future possible scenario could look like, AI becomes much more of our co-pilot, and we are all wearing a version of a neuro wearable to help us maintain our flow state and update status to our team members because maybe we're working on different schedules to accommodate our personal lives, so we have more flexibility, more convenience. And that the smart technology that's being incorporated into our office spaces can be tied back to some of those neuro wearables and that AI, those algorithms, so that they become more personalized and auto-optimized. So going back to desk booking, maybe your desk is booked by the system because it knows who you have to work with that day, what rooms you need to be working in. Maybe you're being placed within teams that match your cognitive flow. So, your sensory levels are matched to where you're going to be sitting. So you can have ideal senses of concentration or ideation as needed. And then maybe performance changes and it's not just about butts and seats. It's more about if you worked less hours, and you show that you have these shared cognitive patterns and skills that you're kind of better off. So there's a totally different way that we could be looking at work and how work is done and how the office supports work if we integrated some of those three signals. That would be very different. So but in 5 years, I don't see any of that coming to fruition, sadly. There's a lot of estimates out there about, how fast AI is gonna take over. But McKinsey had an estimate that we're only going to be at about 50% of our tasks will be done by AI, but it'll take 20 years before we get there. So that's obviously past our 5-year mark. I think for the next 5 years, offices are going to change in the way that we're going to maybe see amenities shift. We're going to be focusing a little bit more on convenience. We're going to see a lot of right sizing of space types, balancing what is really needed. We're going to see an overhaul of technology. And quite honestly, we really need to be focused on how we can, if what I just described as much further out sounded intriguing to anybody, and they said, this is something that I would love to investigate, in the next 5 years, we need to start doing small changes and implementing some of these things to build the trust and acceptance and governance that's going to be needed to get to that point in the future.
It's going to be an exciting time, interesting time as we get there. It was such
We
a
are
good
living in a great time.
We are. Such a great conversation, Valerie. Thank you so much for talking to me.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Valerie Jardon is Managing Director of Strategy at IA Interior Architects.
Thanks for listening to Work in the Future. If today's episode sparked ideas for your organization, reach out. I would love to help you shape the future of work at your next event. To discuss your event and book me as a speaker or moderator, please visit lindanazareth.com or email speaking@lindanazareth.com. You can also visit me on Instagram @lindanazareth Keynote Speaker and send me a direct message there. If you did like this discussion about the future of work, please remember to subscribe to the podcast. Also, your reviews really help people to find us, so please make sure you take time to leave one wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks so much for listening. And as always, thank you to Stokely Audio for audio production.